Okay, now we're going to be talking about the methods. We've already solved a quadratic equation by looking at their graphs. By factoring, we're going to look at other methods of solving these quadratic equations. We're now going to solve them by taking square roots. Quadratic equations of the form ax squared plus c equals 0 can be solved using the square root property. Notice that we're missing the b term. That's the only time you can use this. The square root property says this: if x squared is equal to n, then we can move our square root over by writing x is equal to plus or minus the square root of n. Because if you think about it, if I tell you x squared is 49, what number squared gives you 49? It could be a 7 or it could be a negative 7. So that's the reason we have to put that plus or minus symbol. So here's our steps to solving by taking square roots. We isolate x squared. We take the square roots of both sides. And we simplify, making sure to put the plus minus symbol out front. So here we go. We know we could solve this by factoring, but let's move our 64 over. Gives you x squared is 64. So therefore, x is equal to get rid of a square, we're going to do plus and minus the square root of 64. So therefore, x would be either positive or negative 8. And you can write it this way, or you could again write it in set builder notation here, so negative 8, or just set notation, negative 8, positive 8. We'll just leave our answers like this for this lesson. Number 2, move the 8 over by subtracting. You now have 7x squared is equal to 15 minus 8 is 7. Divide by 7 gives you x squared is 1. Get rid of a square by doing the plus and minus square root of 1, which is equal to positive or negative 1. Number 3, subtract the 5, gives you 81. X squared is equal to 21 minus 5 is 16. Here the 81 by dividing. So therefore, x is equal to, get rid of square by doing plus and minus the square root of 16 over 81. That's going to be plus or minus the square root of a fraction. Find the square root of the top, find the square root of the bottom. Positive or negative 4/9. The next one, number 4, move the 1 over by subtracting, gives you 17 minus 1 is 16. Move the 8 over by dividing, gives you x squared is 2. Now here, we don't know the square root of 2, so therefore we're going to do plus and minus the square root of 2, and we're going to leave it. You can try to simplify them if able to, but that one you cannot simplify. Next one, move the 9 over. To isolate, again, we're trying to isolate our x squared. Move the 9 over by adding, that's going to be 64. Move the 2 over by dividing, gives you a 32. So therefore, x is equal to, get rid of a square by doing the plus and minus square root of 32. This, we don't know the square root of 32, but we can simplify it. We're going to split it into what we do know the square root of, the largest square root that we know, times whatever's left. 16 times 2 is 32. So we're going to write that as plus and minus. Square root of 16 is 4. Leave the square root of 2. The next one, isolate your x squared by first subtracting 3. That gives you 108. We then divide by 9, gives you x squared is equal to 12. We get rid of a square by doing plus and minus the square root of 12. We're going to split that into a square root that we know. So let's split it into the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. So our final answer is going to be plus and minus 2 square root of 3. Okay, moving on to the next one, number 7. We move the 4 over first by subtracting because it is a positive 4. So we have negative 3x squared equals negative 81 when you subtract them. We're going to divide by our negative 3. That gives us 27. To get rid of a square, we're going to do plus and minus the square root of 27. We're going to split that to simplify it. We're going to split it into root 9 times root 3. So our final answer will be positive or negative 3 root 3. Number 8, we move the 10 over by subtracting, gives us 5x squared is 300. We move the 5 over by dividing, gives me x squared is 60. So therefore, x is going to equal plus and minus the square root of 60. We're going to split that into something we know to simplify it, and we can go through our perfect roots. Let's see, I believe that 4 is going to be the largest one, and here again is how you can test. When you split it, divide it by 4, you get 15. When you split it, see if there's another perfect root inside that 15. If there is, then we could use a larger number to divide it. And there's not another perfect root, so we're fine. That'd be plus and minus. Square root of 4 is 2. Leave the root 15 under the radical. And number 9, move the 1 over by subtracting, gives you negative 1/2 x squared equals negative 40. To divide by negative 1/2, we're going to multiply the other side by its reciprocal. And that gives you x squared is equal to 80. So therefore, x is equal to plus and minus the square root of 80. Split it into a radical that you know. If you use 4, 4 is not going to work, but let me show you something. If you were to use 4, notice that in that 20, you could have broke that down again. That's a 4 times 5, so there's a larger number, which is 16, that you could have used. So let's split it into 16 times 5, so therefore your final answer is going to be plus and minus 4 root 5.